Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're revving up and getting into some classic RC action. We're diving into some great research you've shared on upgrading, well, a couple of real icons. The Tamiya Grasshopper and the Grasshopper II.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got quite a bit here, technical specs, parts lists, even some history on these buggies. It's more than just speed, though. It's about, appreciating the engineering. What makes a grasshopper feel like a grasshopper?
Exactly. That's the core mission for this deep dive. We want to figure out the hop-up scene, looking at parts from the Hornet, the Super Hornet, and the Rising Fighter. The goal is to give you clear options for boosting performance, making them tougher, but, and this is the tricky part, doing it carefully. We don't want you to accidentally turn your beloved hopper into, well, something else entirely.
Right, you want to respect its identity. And it's interesting, looking at how Tamiya evolved these chassis designs. The original Grasshopper set the stage, and then the Grasshopper II kind of built on that, even becoming the base for later models.
Yeah, understanding that lineage is key, isn't it, for making smart upgrade choices?
Definitely.
Okay, so let's start digging in. Part 1, the original Grasshopper, the GH1. Your research draws some really clear lines between it and the Hornet, even though they share that main chassis tub.
That's right, yeah. Both built on the 0335050 tub. Think of it like the basic skeleton they share. But Tamiya made some really different choices on top of that foundation.
Okay, like the motor, obviously. Grasshopper gets the little 380. Hornet gets the much beefier 540, the classic Mabuchi silver can.
Exactly, the RS540SH. And that power difference really drove other changes, especially in the rear suspension.
Right, the Grasshopper is super simple. Just friction springs, fixed axle, kind of bouncy, right?
Very bouncy, yeah. It's basic, easy to manage, but definitely bouncy. The Hornet, though, that's where they introduced oil-filled dampers and this rolling rigid axle.
Rolling rigid. Okay, that sounds more complex. What does that actually mean for how it drives?
Well, unlike the Grasshopper's axle, which is just bolted solid, the Hornets can articulate a little bit, side to side. Imagine it tilting slightly over bumps.
Ah, so it keeps the wheels on the ground better.
Precisely. Better contact means better traction, better handling, especially when things get rough. It uses specific parts to achieve this different gearbox side plates with links. Part number 900-005156 in the D parts bag, I think. Plus specific shock mounts, axle springs.
And the oil dampers themselves, of course. Big upgrade over just springs.
Oh, huge difference. The oil controls the compression and rebound, stops that pogo stick effect you get with simple friction springs.
Yeah.
Much more control. Part numbers for the shocks. Bodies are 9805098, caps 9805099, shafts 9805966. You get the idea. It's a whole system.
Makes sense. Even the bodies are totally different approaches. The Grasshopper's hard plastic, screwed on, versus the Hornet's lighter Lexan with clips. You mentioned the Grasshopper body actually adds stiffness?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Because it's bolted directly, that rigid ABS body essentially becomes part of the chassis structure, adding torsional stiffness. Good for smooth surfaces, maybe.
Whereas the Hornet's Lexan is lighter, maybe takes hits better.
Exactly. More flexible, probably more durable in a crash. Different trade-offs, durability versus a potentially more precise feel from the stiffer setup.
And tires, too. Grasshopper paddles versus Hornet spikes.
Right. Paddles for loose stuff, sand maybe. The Hornet Super Grippers, part 9805034, they bite better on harder dirt, give more cornering grip.
Okay, so let's say you've got a Grasshopper, GH1. You want more performance, maybe borrowing from the Hornet, but you want it to stay a Grasshopper. Where's the safe place to start?
Well, a 540 motor swap is probably the most common first step. It's pretty much a direct fit once you pull out the 380 adapter.
Just drops right in.
Yeah. Grab a standard RS540SH or even the Tamiya Sport Tune 540. That's part 53068. People call it the Hot Rod Grasshopper. Usually best to pair it with an 18-tooth pinion gear, like the Hornet uses stock part 3515006.
Gives it more punch without changing the look too much.
Exactly. And the other, almost universally good upgrade, ball bearings. Swap out those stock brass bushings, like the 5x8 mil ones.
Part 9805185.
That's the one. Put in a full set of ball bearings, 5x11s for the wheels and gearbox usually, maybe some 5x8s elsewhere. Reduces friction everywhere.
So better speed, longer run times, smoother operation. Seems like a no-brainer.
Totally. Low impact on identity, big impact on efficiency.
Okay, motor and bearings are pretty safe bets. What about handling? That Hornet rear suspension sounds tempting, but also like it could really change things.
Yeah, this is where you got to think carefully about that Grasshopper feel. You could bolt on the Hornet's oil dampers. You'll need the Hornet rear shock mounts, 9805100.
Okay.
And you can also install the whole pivoting axle setup, The gearbox side plates, 905-156, and the axle springs, 980-5304. Those are the bits that allow that side-to-side movement.
Wouldn't that just make it handle like a Hornet? You lose that sort of wild, bouncy Grasshopper charm.
That's the risk, yeah. It will handle better on rough stuff, no question. But does it still feel like a Grasshopper? That fixed axle, the simple springs, that's kind of its signature, right? Its personality.
So maybe just the oil shocks is a compromise. Keep the fixed axle feel, but get better damping.
That's a popular route. You could use the Hornet shocks with maybe some aftermarket aluminum shock mounts designed for the Grasshopper chassis itself. That gives you the damping control without fundamentally changing the axle mechanics.
So oil shocks alone are probably okay for identity, but the full pivoting axle conversion, that's pushing it.
I'd say so. That's a major mechanical change. Very common back in the day, but it definitely shifts the character significantly towards the Hornet.
Okay, that's a really helpful distinction. What about the front end? Anything from the Hornet that swaps over easily?
Actually, yeah. The front steering uprights, or knuckles, Tamiya Part 5395 fits both the Grasshopper and the Hornet.
Ah, so a simple durability or precision upgrade there.
Right. If your originals are worn, it's a direct replacement. And tires, like we said, the Hornet Super Grippers offer more grip. Easy swap.
And easy to swap back if you want the original look. Minimal identity hit.
Exactly. Keep the original paddles handy.
So, GH1 upgrades, 540 motor, bearings definitely, front knuckles probably fine, oil shocks maybe, consider the impact, full Hornet rear end that's getting close to a Hornet conversion.
That's a good summary. And there are minor things too, like aftermarket aluminum bits, chassis axle holders, shock mounts mostly for durability if you're running more power, lower identity impact there.
This paints a clear picture for the GH1. It's about that balance, enhancing it but keeping its soul intact.
Precisely. And that same thinking applies maybe even more so when we look at the Grasshopper SICK and its family tree.
Right, the GH2. Your research shows it's quite different. It shares its chassis part 0335092 with the Super Hornet and the Rising Fighter. So GH1 hop-ups are mostly out.
Largely, yes. The GH2 chassis was a step forward, different design philosophy. The big thing is that inverted A-arm front suspension.
Right, arms point up from the chassis. Better camber control, you said.
Generally, yeah. Keeps the tire flatter on the ground as the suspension moves. More predictable handling than the GH1's simple front end. So yeah, geometry, different parts. GH1 hop-ups generally won't just bolt on.
Okay, so let's compare the GH2 and the Super Hornet first. Shared chassis, but key differences.
Motor, again, is often one. GH2 re-releases sometimes at a 380. Super Hornet's always 540. But the big visual and functional difference is the front shock tower.
How so?
The GH2 uses what Tamiya calls the C-parts tower. Early ones were 00035304, later 105555115, marked C17. It has a very specific look. The Super Hornet uses a D-parts tower, HE20005495, marked D2, different shape, different shock mounting points, optimized for its oil shocks.
Ah, so swapping that tower is a major visual change. Gives it the Super Hornet look up front.
Totally. Changes the whole face of the buggy, and the front suspension geometry too. And speaking of suspension, the GH2 re-release usually has basic friction dampers, the Super Hornet. 4 proper oil-filled shocks, much better control.
Okay, oil shocks front and rear on the Super Hornet. And tougher rear arms too.
Yeah, the SH has oil shocks, parts X025072 and Y022573. And the rear arms seem more robust, maybe some added protection molded in. Plus, unique bodies, wheels, tires for each. Very distinct looks. Super Hornet wheels are F04454595, are IS044546. Tires F9805474 are 53059. Different uprights, too, actually. No, wait, the steering upright, 0445128 is shared. My mistake?
Gotcha. So if I have a GH2 and I want those Super Hornet oil shocks, how easy is that?
Rears should bolt on fairly easily using the standard GH2 mounting points. The fronts, well, ideally you'd use the Super Hornet D-parts tower for the correct geometry.
But if I want to keep the GH2 look...
Then you could look at Tamiya's own CVA shock Submini 2, part 50519, or the short 2, 50520. Those are known to fit the stock GH2 C-parts tower.
And didn't Tamiya release a GH2 with oil shocks anyway?
Exactly. The Grasshopper II 7-Odd-like Special Edition, number 47471, came with oil shocks standard. So adding CVAs to a regular GH2 is almost like an official upgrade path. Very identity-friendly.
That's a great point. An OEM plus vibe. What about those tougher Super Hornet rear arms?
It gets a bit tricky. Looking at the parts lists, the main A-parts arms themselves might actually be the same base part number. Tamiya 1000-5340 is listed for both GH2 and SH A-parts. 0005340. The difference in robustness might come from how they assemble with other SH-specific parts, like maybe different lower shock mounts linked to their D parts.
So just swapping the arms might not give you the full Super Hornet rear end strength? Geometry is probably similar, though.
Geometry is likely very close, yeah. But just swapping arms might not be the full picture for durability. Needs careful comparison.
Okay, so for GH2 upgrades from the Super Hornet, 540 motor if needed, ball bearings always. Oil shocks, especially CVAs, thanks to the Black Edition precedent, seem pretty safe for identity.
Right.
But be wary of the Super Hornet D parts front tower, the body, the wheel stairs, if you want it to still look and feel like a Grasshopper II.
Exactly. Those are the big visual identifiers that scream Super Hornet, not Grasshopper II.
Makes sense. Now let's pivot to the Rising Fighter. Also uses the GH2 chassis tub. What hop-ups can we borrow from there?
Okay, Rising Fighter usually comes with a 540, so again, motor upgrade potential for a 380 power GH2. The standard GH2 gearbox, B parts 0005276, handles a 540 fine. Bearings, of course.
Standard stuff. Anything unique from the Rising Fighter?
Yes. The front shock tower reinforcements. The Rising Fighter kit includes extra parts, D parts 9 under 005919 and H parts 9 under 05920 that actually bolt onto the standard GH2 C parts tower to strengthen it.
Oh, that's clever. Beefs up the stock tower without changing the look.
Exactly. Great durability upgrade, especially with a faster motor or rougher driving, and it keeps that GH2 front-end identity. Really smart little addition.
That seems like a really good low-impact upgrade. What about the gearbox? You noted the Rising Fighter uses a different one.
It does, yeah. It uses a gearbox case, part 9335235. That's actually derived from Tamiya's later DT01 chassis. It bolts into the GH2 chassis fine, and crucially, it keeps the same Grasshopper second-style rolling rigid rear suspension mounting points, not the DT01 central pivot.
So it fits, but it's different inside.
Right. Different internal parts, C ports 9335230, B parts 9335232. It also has a partial motor enclosure, which is nice for protection. But performance-wise, it's not necessarily a huge hop-up over the standard GH2 gearbox unless you really want that motor cover or your old gearbox is broken. It's compatible, but maybe not essential.
Got it.
Yeah.
So from the Rising Fighter for a GH2, 540 motor, bearings, definitely those front tower reinforcement braces, those seem like solid identity-preserving choices.
I'd agree.
And again, avoid the Rising Fighter body, 9335528, and its unique Astro wheels, F51205, R51206, and tires if you want to keep the GH2 look.
Exactly. Those are signature Rising Fighter parts. The key is always asking, does this upgrade subtly improve things, or does it fundamentally change what the car is?
Okay. Thinking about that GH2 chassis, the 0335092 tub, you covered the GH2 itself, Super Hornet, Rising Fighter. Are there any other Tamiya buggies hiding out there that use that same chassis? Any secret parts donors?
That's a good question. We dug into that trying to see if anything else shared that specific tub. Based on the research, it really seems like the core family is Grasshopper II, including the re-release 58643, the Black Edition 47471, the Super G 49501, plus the Super Hornet 58124, and the Rising Fighter 584 time, and the RTR 57781.
So no other distinct buggy models seem to use that specific 0335092 tub?
Not that we could clearly identify, no. Tamiya used lots of different chassis across their buggy range. That 0335092 seems pretty tightly linked to the GH2 lineage.
But as you mentioned with the Black Edition, the GH2 variants themselves are important sources, right?
Absolutely critical point. The Black Edition coming with CVA oil shocks straight from Tamiya is huge. It basically gives official blessing to using CVA Mini 2s 50519 or short toes 50520 on any Grasshopper II.
It makes it an authentic Tamiya-approved kind of upgrade.
Exactly. It's not some weird Franken-mod. It's an enhancement that fits within the model's own history, an OEM Plus upgrade, like you said. That preserves identity extremely well.
So this whole discussion really highlights that preserving the model's identity, it's not just about the paint job. It's much deeper.
Oh, absolutely. For a lot of collectors and runners, especially with these re-releases, that original character is everything. It's the look, sure, but also the way it drives, the feel of it. Box art accuracy is a big thing for many.
So besides the obvious body shell and the decals like the Grasshopper set 9495468 or the Hornets 9495452, what are those core things that define the soul of these models?
Okay, for the original Grasshopper GH1, that hard ABS body is iconic. The 380 motor, even if often upgraded, is part of its origin story. And those super simple friction springs at the back. Change all that to Hornet spec.
And you basically have a Hornet in a Grasshopper shell.
Pretty much. For the Grasshopper II section GH2, that unique C-parts front tower, part 105555115, and the resulting front-end stance is key. Also, its original 8-spoke wheel design. Slap on the Super Hornet D-parts front end, and it visually loses a huge chunk of its GH2 identity.
And wheels and tires really anchor the look too, don't they? You wouldn't put modern racing slicks on a Grasshopper.
Right. The GH1's smooth white dish wheels are unmistakable. The GH2's 8 spokes, too. Using the Super Hornet's 5 spokes, or the Rising Fighter's Astral design, just instantly changes the vibe.
And it's the sum of the parts, isn't it? Lots of small changes can add up.
Definitely. You have to decide your own limit. Where does it stop being an upgraded Grasshopper and start becoming something else? Maybe focus on things you can easily reverse if you want to experiment, but keep the option to go back to stock.
It really sounds like upgrading these classics is, well, it's an art. Balancing the desire for better performance or durability with a real respect for what makes the model special in the first place.
That sums it up perfectly. It's finding your balance between performance and authenticity, respecting the original design, and that nostalgia factor these buggies carry.
So for everyone listening, if you're thinking about tweaking your Grasshopper or Grasshopper II, hopefully this deep dive gave you a lot to consider. We've looked at tons of parts, compatibility issues, and crucially, the impact on identity.
Yeah, and maybe start small if you're unsure. A motor upgrade, ball bearings, those are usually safe bets. Suspension mods require a bit more thought about that performance versus character trade-off.
And remember that Grasshopper II Black Edition Tamiya themselves showed that oil shocks are a perfectly valid enhancement for a GH2.
Great example of a sympathetic upgrade.
Okay, let's leave you with a final thought to chew on. As you look at your own Grasshopper or Grasshopper II, or think about getting one, what single thing, what characteristic do you think is the absolute must-keep essence, the soul of that specific model? And how far are you willing to push the upgrades before you feel it loses that soul? Finding that personal answer? Well, that's really the heart of enjoying and evolving these amazing classic RC machines. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.